All the I don't even call
Or bad idea.
You're listening to the Breece Creator Podcast. I'm Lee Breece. Wow, holy smokes. There's so much to talk about. I'm sincerely apologize. I've been gone for so long. I didn't mean to step away from the mic like I did, but it just happened. Hopefully now we can get back on schedule. In this project, I have a lot of updates, obviously. Recycling appliances, electronics, organization, and a lot more. Please stay in your seats. Whether you love baseball or if you just watch it to fall asleep, amateur or expert, everyone is welcome to the game. So I have done so much in the last, I think it's been almost a month. I think the last episode I did was the second week of March. It's now the second week of April. So yeah, it's been about a month. And really the gist of some things that went down, I recorded an episode and I realized I never hit the record button. I got really pissed off, and so I just said, the hell with it. So I am now back to recording now, doing a podcast. I know today's not the actual day that it usually comes out. However, I am ready to do another episode. So one thing I'm really actually upset about is that on SoundCloud, I had no idea, but you're actually capped at how many episodes or how much time, what the total length of audio you can upload is. And so actually after the fourth episode, so when I uploaded the fifth, this is including the pilot, I was over that amount, and so they made me delete an episode, which I was really upset about that. And so I didn't upload another episode, but I did revamp sort of the Creator Podcast website. So if you go there, all the episodes, including the pilot episode, are all listed on our website. That's breecewoodworking.wixsite.com/creatorpodcast. So I've actually been able to do a lot. So the weather is warmer now, so I'm actually able to open the door in the shop. And usually when I'm able to open the door to the shop, and if you're not familiar, my shop is actually a detached garage from my house. So it is its own structure. It's its own thing. I don't have to worry about having to deal with being able to get the car in there, get it in the house. It's very nice. Every person that comes over is like 100% jealous that I have this separate shop. But the great thing about being able to open the door is typically when I open the door, that's when I get significantly more inventory. I am pallet hunting like crazy. I'm finding furniture on the side of the road. I'm getting a bunch of other crap to load in there to go through material. Because actually, one of the big projects I did actually over spring break was, for people who clean their mowers, who have to sharpen the blades, who get the mower ready for season. They have to jack it up and crawl under there, and I am so sick of having to lay on the concrete floor that's dirty. It's covered in sand. It cuts up your skin. Having to crawl around on the floor. So I made this ramp, lift, whatever you want to call it. I made it like little stools for the mower to actually sit on. So actually it goes up a ramp. Then I have these 2x4s that come off that connect these 4 stools. And then once I drive it over those, I take it off so I can work on it underneath it. There's a picture on the Breece Woodworking page. You can check it out if you want to. So essentially what I did is I made this system to where I can get the mower actually up high enough that I can sit on a dolly and go underneath there, take the blades off. I can get a light under there. It's way more convenient than trying to crawl under there, under the floor. Absolute pain. And so by doing this, it took a lot of material. Actually, one of the things about when my dad built the shop is that he did not build in any storage. He was the kind of guy that would go out and buy all the wood he needed for a project. He would never, ever stock up on material. He would never, ever, when he saw something on the side of the road, he'd never pick it up. He was always that kind of guy that would just buy the material as he needed it. And so we didn't really build any lumber storage into the shop. So I've added some shelves. I've turned some things that was kind of shelving into shelving. Not really shelving anymore. It's lumber racks but on really cheap shelving brackets. So it can't really hold a lot of material. So typically, one big project will go through all of my inventory. And this mower ramp thing was a big project for my standards. I use the big project for me is like a pergola or this mower ramp, just because it took a lot of material in terms of what I have already. Those are probably the two biggest projects I've actually made. I'm not really big on doing big projects because for me, I talk about woodworking as something to solve my problems, and I don't really have any problems that require big project solutions. There's a lot of things I want to make, but I don't really need them. I have workbenches, I have desks, I have tables. I don't need any of those things. I don't know when people start woodworking. This is the big misconception. People think you do woodworking. Their first project is always a table, or a chair, or another table, or a table, or a table. I don't know why people are so obsessed with making tables, especially as their first project, because you don't need a table. And any table you make when you start woodworking is going to be a piece of crap, and you usually end up cutting it up anyway. So I have never made a table, although you're going to find out in a little bit. I am sort of making a table. Not really to this day. And even when I finish this project, I'm still going to be able to say that I've never made a table, and I most likely will never make a table because I don't need a table. I have plenty of tables. I have all these foldable tables that my dad had. I have my kitchen table. I have a table in my room. I have tables everywhere. Do not need another table. But when I started woodworking, obviously I started when I was a younger age. But I was making very little things. I started out with little crafts projects when I was below 10. And then after 10, I started making some shelves, made some gifts for friends, made some very, very simple boxes, not complicated, very simple boxes. And then more recently, in the last 3 or 4 years, I've gotten to make more sophisticated boxes and more boxes and other projects, a variety of projects, typically boxes, just because I need a lot of boxes to store things. It's one of the biggest things I always complained about living in my house, especially with the way my dad was, is that he had all this stuff, but he'd hang it up on the wall. And we have floor-to-ceiling pegboard in my basement, and he would hang every individual tool on the wall. He would hang every individual package on the wall, and it drove me insane because he was an inventory guy. So if he found a good deal on anything or something was on clearance, he stocked up. And that's kind of the thing. I'm the kind of guy that will stock up on material because you never know when you're going to need something for a project. He's the kind of guy that will stock up on hardware, on screws, hinges, handles, whatever for projects. I am not that kind of guy because I don't spend money. I take the free stuff. If I find something in the garbage that's got a handle on it, I take the handle off of it. That's the kind of guy I am. If I don't have a handle, I make a handle. So I don't have much inventory, but I have gone pallet hunting recently, just the last 2 weekends. So just to acquire some more material so I can start working on projects because I used a lot on that mower lift. Hopefully, I have projects in mind. In fact, I was actually in the middle of a project that I just stopped doing, kind of like I just stopped doing this podcast. However, I do plan and I do anticipate getting back on schedule. But you just never know when you're going to need material. And I don't know why I have this obsession with pallet hunting, just because I'm fortunate enough to live in an area where there's a lot of development going on right now, and I feel like that once that's gone, so is my wood source. Maybe that's why, but I don't. I pallet hunt. And pallet hunt, I just use as my term for getting wood for free. That's kind of, I don't take pallets, so I don't know why I call it pallet hunting. All I do is just get 2x4s from like construction, some industrial crates. I don't do pallets. Pallets are the stupidest thing you can make anything out of, in my opinion. As of right now, I got this huge amount of inventory just sitting in my garage, sitting on my shop, sitting on sawhorses, just waiting to be cleaned. Because that's the first thing that I do before I put anything on the shelf, is I always go over it with water and a scrub brush to get out all the dirt and all the little pebbles that are in the wood, because that's how you destroy your machines and you scratch up your bench and all this other crap. So I always make sure I always clean my wood before I put it away. But something else I've really gotten into is obviously I built Matthias Wandel's bandsaw, and that requires a motor, obviously, to run. And I got a motor, fortunately enough, from my grandpa. It was a 1/3 horsepower from his shop to use on that. And then actually a month ago, my uncle found a motor in his shop to lend me that was a 1/2, so I was able to step it up. And the bandsaw runs greater than ever with the 1/2 horsepower, still shooting for that 1 horsepower motor. But now that the weather's been a lot nicer, a lot of people have begun to start throwing things out. And people typically will throw out their appliances. They'll just set them on the curb and assume that scrappers pick them up. And so I've been kind of toying with the idea of grabbing electronics, appliances, and trying to see what I could salvage from them. Because you take these appliances or electronics, you take them to a place where you have to pay to recycle them, or you have to pay for someone to take it away. Or if you're getting something like a fridge or something like that, usually the company that delivers the fridge will take your old fridge away. Typically, I mean, a fridge is a very specific item. I'm talking about basically appliances in general. Okay, and the electronics too, because I have a friend. Him and I talked about. He helped me make the bandsaw. Not, I mean, he didn't. He helped me for maybe a day or two. I've talked about a couple stories about him in the podcast in the past. But he has said all of high school, all of middle school, every single year, he has always said that he is going to do robotics. Every single year, he has always said that, and he's never done it. Never in all 7 years he's been in school. Never once did robotics. However, this year, senior year, 7 years of saying he wasn't going to do robotics. The 7th year, this year, his senior year, he decided to join the robotics team. Okay, and what I didn't realize for people who do making, for people who have children or follow the news, robotics huge compared to where it was 3 years ago. 4 years ago. Incredible growth. You talk about how the 21st century is being shaped. I mean, these kids who sign up for this robotics programs at their schools or start robotics programs at their schools, just with the level of available knowledge, relative price going down of materials, more and more people are having access to these kind of resources, and that makes being in robotics more appealable, especially as things become more technologically dependent. The youth, there's just been a boom about wanting to understand how to code, how electrical engineering, how motors work, how different parts interact. And I think that's so cool. But the point I bring up with the appliances and my friend who does robotics now is that he now has a real interest. I've talked about how, because he's been in my shop and he's in robotics, how he's just gotten so into making. He loves making now. He wants to make all these things. He has a huge list, but no time. And we all can relate to that. I know definitely I can, because I have tons of projects that I never ever have time to do. And then eventually I just, didn't need that anyway. Just don't make it. And so I bring up the fact that he does robotics now and how he's into it, because now he's really into making. I've talked about how he has really gotten into making because he's worked with me in the shop. He's done robotics, so now he knows how all these different things go together. And similar to me, he sees these expensive electronics and he looks at them and says, I can make that. So similar to my bandsaw, one of the things he wants to do is he actually wants to make a drone. And that's something actually I kind of wanted to do too. So I don't know. He doesn't really have time, so we're kind of going back and forth on this idea of making a drone, because there's a lot of things that him and I have said we're going to build, but have never happened. But how that kind of coincides with him being in robotics and these appliances is that actually it all started one day when I was on the way to the radio station. If you don't know, I actually work at a radio station in my hometown, and I was driving. Long story short, I was driving to it, and I drive past an apartment complex. Now, I have heard from many woodworkers online that apartment complexes are actually one of the best places you can go to get salvaged materials. And I have had that similar to motors. I have had that perspective for a while, but I've never been able to find anything. And I guess the reason that that apartment complexes are so great is that typically the people who live there, they are just the type of people that are moving from place to place or just don't have a high investment in furniture. And so they'll buy stuff and they'll put it in their house, so they'll take it with them or get it from a friend or whatever. But then when they move, they don't really have anything to do with it because they're typically evicted or they're moving out to another apartment somewhere far away. They don't want to move this stuff, so they just throw it out. And surprisingly enough, a lot of that stuff is actually like good furniture for making stuff out of. I was surprised what I was able to find in the dumpster that I found, because that was the thing, is I never had found anything in a dumpster before in an apartment complex. But I'm driving on the way to the radio station one day, and there's a huge dumpster. Someone had just moved, and I go by there, and this is furniture that someone had all made. It was like a dream. A table, a bed, a couch. All this stuff that somebody had made. Now, when I say couch, I'm not talking about the typical leather or cloth couch you see sitting on the side of the road. This is like almost like a day bed. But also in this stockpile, I found a printer. And I've really gotten into this salvaging electronics. It's kind of when it all started because, if you want to make a drone, you got to have motors. You got to have 4 motors if you want to make a quadcopter, 6 you want to make a hexacopter, 3 if you want to make a tricopter or whatever. But I wanted to, but my friend and I wanted to make a drone, so I was like, well, why don't I take the printer apart and see what I can find? Because typically you have to pay someone to take your material, take your electronics or appliances, whatever, to recycle them. It's like, aren't there parts in this that I can use myself? And so I started with the printer. I destroyed the printer. This is the great thing. This is kind of like the fun part. You get all of your aggression out on this printer because you don't have the right bit to unscrew any of the panels. So I just took a sledgehammer and some pliers and started ripping the thing to shreds. And I got 3 motors out of it, 3 little motors. I got some buttons. You always need buttons, right? And I got some shafting, a lot of shafting actually, like 3 or 4, maybe 5 shafts. There were some other components. Motors was the big thing. The thing is, though, that they weren't all the same, so it's kind of frustrating in terms of trying to make a drone because you need, 4 to 6 motors that are exactly the same. But then after that, I started grabbing some other things. So, like I saw a blower, a furnace blower. I talked about that a little while ago in a previous episode about how I found a furnace blower on the side of the street. Grabbed that blower, switch, some other electrical components, the sheet metal. I've working with my uncle one day across the street from his house. Also, another furnace blower. Got that. Same thing. Got the blower, got some electrical components, got the sheet metal. And then I went way overkill. I picked up, this past Friday, a refrigerator on the side of the road. And I took it apart. And you'd be surprising. If you've ever moved the refrigerator, you know how heavy a refrigerator is. Refrigerators weigh a ton. But by the time I had taken everything off this refrigerator that I could use, I could basically lift what was left, which is the insulation, the paneling on the inside, and the frame, and it was very light. I was able to throw it around, kind of. But I was able to get 2 blower fans off of it. I was able to get some electrical components. Sheet metal was really the big thing, and I've not really used an angle grinder that much, but I was surprised after cutting up all the sheet metal off that refrigerator, how quick the grinding stones on angle grinders wear out. I was absolutely amazed. When I went to Lowe's to buy a new one, I made sure I bought 2. I didn't realize how cheap they were. I thought it was going to be more expensive. Praise the Lord, they're cheap because man, you just go through them. I mean, I used both of them up trying to cut up that fridge. But that's kind of something I want to experiment with in design, is incorporating sheet metal into some of the things that I make. It's very durable material. It's very good for making things for like paneling or whatnot. I just want to in trying to find my style. I'm experimenting with sheet metal and what aspects I can add that into woodworking and whatnot, because I don't use a lot. I don't get boards, so I have to make boards or panels. I don't typically find that kind of stuff. I usually make everything out of 2x4s, and so sheet metal just kind of mixes up the process a little bit. A little simpler, wider variety of materials too. So I kept the sheet metal from the furnace blowers and the fridge and a bunch of other crap also, but that was way overkill. I'm not going to do that again. That, and I was reading afterwards about recycling and scrapping refrigerators. And there's some things that you can do and that you can't do with the refrigerator. I'll put a link in the show notes about salvaging refrigerators if you've ever thought about doing that, or you have a refrigerator yourself. There's some things that are legally you're allowed to do, and there's some things that you aren't allowed to do, just with the chemicals and whatnot, and the condenser that's in it, and some of the other components. But besides that, I actually did keep the doors, just because the doors are stainless steel, and they're magnetic. So I'm sure I'll use those for some things one day. What really ticks me off, though, is that these doors are full of insulation, and the insulation is glued in. And so the only way to get the insulation out is to scrape it out in pieces, which takes forever. So I didn't bother to do that. The doors are still sitting in the shop. I also took the handles off the doors, appliance handles, very good handles. I was actually very impressed. with the handles, so I kept the handles. That and the shelves do come off on the inside, so I took those off. They're plastic, so not really worth keeping, but I do have a place where I can use one of the smaller shelves. Actually, I'm going to put it by my drill press and use that as a drill bit rack, because one of the things my dad did when he built the shop was he put all the drill bits on the opposite side of the drill press, and that doesn't make any sense, because if you're ever going to use drill bits, it's at the drill press and not at the place where he put the bits. Hopefully I can use this mount the shelf to the wall, which really I thought about it, like if, I don't know, depending on what the look is, that's really what the big factor is. The refrigerator shelf might actually be a really cool bookshelf or feature of a room. Not like not something you're trying to make look nice, maybe like in a kid's room or a basement or a man cave or the inside of a cabinet even. I just thought it was really cool, so I actually kept both of them. But I really don't have a use for the small one. However, I told myself that if I can't think of a use for this in 1 month, I'm throwing it away. Because that's the biggest issue that I have. I don't know about you, but one of the issues I have with collecting so much inventory and just stuff in general, especially if it's free, I hold on to it for too long, and it takes up so much space, and I end up never using it. I had that issue with paint a couple years ago. So I was on Craigslist. I'm young and stupid. I just got my driver's license, and I'm going crazy about being able to finally drive around and get materials instead of trying to make stuff out of the scraps that my dad had. And I looked on Craigslist, and this person nearby had a listing on the free page for a bunch of paint. Now, obviously, looking back at it now, someone who's putting a free ad for paint on Craigslist is either A, has a lot of good paint and doesn't want to see it go to waste, or B, has a lot of bad paint or old paint but doesn't want to get rid of it themselves. And so I went out and got it all, and I got like, oh man, it was like 25, 30 cans. It was one of the stupidest things I've ever done. And the issue is that I put all of it on a shelf and never went through any of it. But, I mean, the majority of the paint was old and bad. However, if you've ever bought paint with a lifetime warranty, I have proof for you that the paint that had a lifetime warranty lasted. It was perfectly fine. I just mixed it up. Paint was fine. So if you're ever going to buy paint for like use of projects, always get the lifetime warranty. Especially if you're painting a room or you're painting a house, something like that, get whatever paint you want. But if you're going to get something that you use for like small projects, especially if you buy like a gallon, get the lifetime warranty so that way it can be used for forever. Especially if you store it like outside like I do. But anyway, there was of the 30 cans approximately, probably less than 10 were good. So now it's on me to have to get rid of all of the other paint in a proper way, legal manner. Okay? But the paint that was good, I mean, there's some wild colors like pink and yellow. There's a lot of neutral colors too. But at the end of the day, I have to store all of this, and I have to find uses for all of this paint, because I don't really have enough stuff to paint. And any of the big projects, I don't like to paint anyway, just because I don't like using up paint. Because the other thing is too is that everything, I've seen a lot of people just paint bare wood. Now I know it depends on what project you're doing, but I as someone who makes things, I like to think that what I make is going to last forever. Now, one of the things I love about making things out of wood or out of metal or anything like that is that it's a renewable material. Is that I can make it and it can be reused, it can be recycled, or it's kind of like a house, okay? A wood project, that is. A family will live in their house for forever, for decades, maybe even close to a century. But at the end of the day, once the last person dies, that house, it's time for it to either go away or be reused. It's kind of like moving. If you move away, someone else gets your house, and you use another house. Furniture, same deal. At some point, it's your time. You don't need that piece of furniture or project anymore, so you give it away and hope someone else can use it. And that's what I like about my projects, is that sometimes they reach to the point where it's time for them to be recycled into something else. Now, there's a lot of misconceptions about recycling and reusing and reducing. And recycling is the processing of something. It's not reusing anything. It's taking something that's one thing and either reproducing it into a new raw material or something else. Reusing is taking something that's existing and just reusing it in a different way. But reusing kind of goes into broadened terms. You can reuse pallet wood to make a piece of furniture. That's considered reusing. That's not recycling. Reducing doesn't really have much applicability to making. I guess people who try to be minimalistic in their projects, like I do from time to time, that might be something that they could do. They would do. I wouldn't. But maybe they might do. I don't know. The other thing is, too, kind of piggybacking off of that, is that, as I'm starting to get into this motor collection thing, or I'm starting to get motors so I can make stuff, is that, I'm going to collect all these motors, but at the end of the day, I got to have a place to store all this. If I'm going to keep picking up motors, where am I going to put them all? I'm waiting for the project to come along where I need a motor for something. I'm not actively pursuing motors to make projects I want to build or working on right now, with the exception of the drone. I don't know what I'm going to use these motors for, especially because they're all mainly shaded pole motors you can't really use for anything else besides fans. So I don't have a use for them, but I'm holding on to them anyway. Same thing with this mower lift. I made this. I had a lot of people comment on my woodworking page about, man, I need something like that so I can work on my mower, make it more convenient, which is what I did. It was my goal. But the thing about it is that it's extremely bulky. I got to have a place to store it. And I'm fortunate enough to be in a situation where, I can, there's some places I can store it, but it's huge, it's bulky, it's heavy. It's a lot of little pieces I got to take apart and reassemble. Now, I guess since it's all made out of 2x4s, you could just take it apart. However, it took forever to put together. You're talking about all day, like 3 days. Obviously, I didn't work all day, but I worked a long time on that, and I'd hate to just take it apart, which I could because I have the plans. So I could definitely take it apart and rebuild it next year. But then what if I have an issue with my mower in the next 6 months, next 4 months, tomorrow, and I'm just taking it apart? What is the good of having it then if I'm just going to take it apart to store it or to reuse the material? And as I continuously talk about trying to go through my dad's tools, there's some things that are like, yeah, I might have a use for this someday. But as the minimalists say, as in the Minimalist podcast website, the official Minimalists, someday is one of the most dangerous words in the English language. And they always talk about how you got to write a list about, write down a list of what you want to do and then write a list of what you're doing right now and then try to flip them. You have to listen to the podcast. But if at the end of the day, if I'm not using these tools, they're just taking up space. And, I know a lot of people online who do woodworking are in situations where they have a small shop. They don't have a lot of tools. They're acquiring all these tools. Whereas I'm on the flip side. I inherited a collection. I got rid of the collection. Now I have the rest of the tools that my dad has piled on for decades of crap he's bought at flea markets, rebate sales, flea markets, garage sales, I said already, auctions, estate sales, just piled on over the years. And now I'm finally reaching the point where I got to get rid of all of it because I can't store it. I'm a young person. I'm going to be moving around, going from place to place. I can't hold on to all this crap. That, it's got to find that balance of being a maker and being a minimalist because I firmly believe you can be both. Just haven't found out how to do it yet. So that's going to do it for the 6th episode of the podcast. Thank you for listening. Like I said, I'm sorry I've been out for the last couple weeks, but hopefully now we can get back on schedule. In the outro of this podcast, I want to feature an artist who has released their music into the public domain. Artists who release their music into the public domain, I feel like, understand what art is and how it contributes to the world around it. So I'm going to end the 6th episode of the Breece Creator Podcast with Far Away by MK2. Check the show notes on the website to learn more about the song and the content in this episode at breecewoodworking.wixsite.com/creatorpodcast. If you have a song or if you know of an artist who releases their music into the public domain, please send a link to breececreatorpodcast@gmail.com. If you're on iTunes, please rate and review, share the podcast with a buddy, and subscribe. Like this episode, leave a comment, or send us an email. You can also tweet at us on Twitter or follow us on Instagram. I'm Lee Breece. I'll see you next time on the Breece Creator Podcast.